sitting here sketching some ideas for a bait. Now you download this stuff and you get various shapes, well, most of them standard, I guess. But when you're carving your own, you can make anything you want. The only thing is you got to make it so that it won't be too outlandish, so it'll work. So, the usual standard size baits, along with, thick. This one has a deep belly, so the tail, the hook would trail on the back, along with the back here. And there's more standard stick type baits. This is a big one. Don't dare go much bigger than this, because in this lake where 1.5, 2.5 pound bass are common, once in a while you'll get a big one. And I'm going to fish with these. These are for me. It's about as big as I would tend to go. But what I like to do is I like to make a hinge bait, something that'll move in the water, just to see if I can do it. I've never done it before. I haven't made that many baits, as you may know. And I usually make hinges out of wire loops and various things. But I've had this idea that is probably really screwed up. That I might make a cloth hinge. I've had this piece of sunbrella, which is a really tough, durable type of cloth used for bimini tops on boats. As a matter of fact, my boat, has a top made with this material. This is left over. It's a fairly thick stuff. It's got a multiple cross weave. It's a nylon or some other substance, polyester maybe. It's neat, and that doesn't really matter for this, but it's impervious kind of to UV radiation, sunlight and all that stuff. So the piece I've had on my boat for 10 years, looks the same as when I bought it, except for a few wear marks from where I've scraped it and stuff. But other than that, it's great. It's really tough stuff, and unless I catch 10-pound bass, which just ain't gonna happen. But now that I've said it, maybe I will, right? 2, 3, 4, 5, I think is the biggest I've heard come out of the lake here. I think this would hold as a hinge. So I think I'm going to try to give it a shot here and see what happens. This is what I've come up with. And I'll cut this out and we'll get it started. Those lines are where the joints are going to be. 3 joints, probably too ambitious for me. We'll see. Here's the bait cut out and sanded along the edges. What I've done is I've drawn a line down the middle because I have to split this bait in half in order to put the cloth in it, I think. I'm pretty sure. Well, I had, which turned out to be a really bad idea. After cutting the bait in half, I had the bright idea that I'd put it through my planer. Of course, this is a small piece of wood. One of them went through really good, made it nice and smooth. The other one, the blades just grabbed it. So, this is garbage. Give me a second, I'll whip up another one. I won't bore you with the details. Well, I'm back. It's about 15 minutes later. For those who are interested in making baits, cutting it out and getting it to this point took about 15 minutes. I was going to say 10, but it was probably closer to 15, but no more than that. I've traced the bait on this piece of cloth, this sunbrella, And now I will cut it out. Now, I'm going to think about how I'm going to mount this in there. This is what I've come up with. 3 joints, and the cloth will hopefully act as 3 hinges. Now I have to gouge out a little area so that when I glue the bait together, there'll be a little room for the hinge in there. And then, before I glue it together, I'm going to have to cut the bait into 3 sections. I've got 2 halves in pieces. Now, I've got to bevel the inside edge of each piece to give it a little room for the bait to move back and forth. That'll come next. Okay, these are all cut and beveled, and here's the second half of this, and this edge is rounded off so that when this is put in here, it can move back and forth. And the other two sections are done the same way. Hope for the best. Taking the bait and put it on this piece of masking tape. And take some super glue. I've got these 2 hinges either taped or the hinge glued on, these 2 halves. So what I'm going to do now, I have enough here, is I'm going to mix up some 2-part epoxy and glue these together. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but tomorrow I'll take it apart and we'll see if we can't work the bait a little bit. I still have to carve it into shape, and of course it's got to be painted, and we'll go from there and see how it goes. Well, it's the next day, and here's the bait, and it's kind of okay, but let me show you what's wrong with it. Where I had taken the joint and put it kind of further back, there's good movement. But in these others, the movement is a bit tight. And I don't know if it's the design or, you don't see baits designed this way that are V-shaped like that. So it could be the design. I kind of wanted to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to take some off in here a little bit, and then I'll be back to show you the results. And if it didn't work, well, we'll probably have to do it again. Using the scroll saw, I carefully cut into the grooves, trying not to cut the cloth, and I don't think I did. And here we have a semi-movable fish. So, now it's time to carve. Well, here it is. Not too bad. It's got some movement to it. And I think what I'm going to do is I've sanded down this small piece of wood into a dowel, and I think I'm going to drill a hole and put a piece through each of these segments to help hold them together. I know the epoxy is probably pretty good, but if this should pull the cloth out, which is also super glued and epoxied in, you could just take the bait in half. So I'm going to put a dowel through each segment in order to try to lock those in. Well, in this unorthodox swim bait build, I've got 4 pegs, 1 in each segment, that goes right through and glued in. This should help hold the piece segments together this way, even though they are epoxied, and also lock the cloth hinge in. So it would be a lot harder to pull it out. I don't think it could now. The hinge would have to break. Will that happen? Yet to be seen. We'll see. I've decided that I need a little weight in this bait because it's going to float, so I'm going to make 3 holes. I have to make them shallow because I don't want to cut into the cloth hinge, and of course the eyelet holes. And the eyelets, made like you may have seen me do it before and seen others. And here's one of them. I've decided to carve some gills in this bait. It's big enough, it's a little easier to handle than some of the others I've done, so I'm going to do that. And the eye sockets. I can use some bigger eyes, but I think I won't use any that are too big. And I've got to fill the holes with lead, all 3 of them. Now some super glue and baking soda to plug those holes up and keep those lead plugs in. And I've made and now finishing up the diving bill. And it's time to put the eyelets in, all 3 of them. Put in a little bit of epoxy. And epoxying in the diving bill. This bait is just about ready to paint. It has a good movement to it, and it ain't too pretty now, but it will be, I think, when I start painting it. This bait's going to be very white and with a little bit of silver in it. I'm going to really try not to overdo it. I have this urge to make it darker and darker. I really want it to be light colored, and I'm going to try to stay true to that. One thing that I'm undecided about is, how do I deal with this space? Do I just paint? I need to paint the whole thing, but when I put the scales on it, do I just do the outside, or do I kind of make it go on the inside and leave the rest of it a plain color? I'm not sure. If I do, by putting the scales in the slots, I'll have to put the mesh in there, and that's going to be mean painting it segment by segment. I'd like to paint the whole thing all at once, which I think is what I'm going to do. Right now it has sealer on it, and it's about ready to go. First I'm going to give the beta a primer of white. And now I'm putting a little bit of pearl, particularly on the belly side. I'm going to be using regular cloth window screen to make a scale pattern. The tighter you get it, the better it comes out. So I have lots of alligator and other clips. The scale pattern is an overlay of transparent silver. And continue along the back with a little bit of silver. Not too much. I'm trying to keep it light. And a touch of white on the edge of that silver where I carved the gill plates. I'm going to do a little bit of fly tying for a trailer hook for this, so I'm going to finally pull some of the paper through from my roll and tear it off to give myself sort of a clean desk. I have never in my life tied a fly before. I made this holder out of a pair of cheap vice grip type pliers by grinding down the ends and taking the teeth off. Picked up a few items with some money that I got for Christmas from Cabela's. And here I am wrapping some bucktail on. No whip knots here, all half cinch, so that'll come later maybe. And old fumble fingers trying to get this done. A little nail polish. I did use some super glue to put the threads down too. And then it'll be time to take it out of the vise and trim it up and be ready to put on the lure when it's done. The last finishing touch are the eyes. These are red ones. The finish coat is going to be a little bit of UV resin and tiny bit of silver glitter. Well, it's been in the UV curing chamber for 20 minutes on the first coat, and I put a second coat on and left it in 30 minutes. But there it is. Now, to put some hooks on it. Okay, I moved over to the carving bench because it's a better height for the stool that I'm on. Here's the bait. Here is the trailing fly that I tied. My first one. Not pretty, but it'll do. And I have my split rings. And my big old fingers are kind of a klutz when it comes to this, but I'll do what I can and definitely speed this up because it will be boring, and I may even skip some of it. For those of you who don't know, this is a pair of pliers with a tooth, and the tooth is designed to split the ring so that you can put your hook in it. I've got to open that up. There was a little piece of resin in there, so this one is much looser now. Hopefully that'll work good in the water. It'll move good. We'll find out. But we'll find out in the spring.